On a le temps pour une ou deux interventions, une réaction ici. Est-ce que quelqu'un veut reprendre la parole, réagir à ce qui a été dit, ou bien alors dans la salle? Monsieur, si vous voulez vous présenter, parce que je crois que le débat est enregistré. Vous n'avez pas de micro? Ah, oh, bon, on va vous en trouver un. Tenez.
Palestinien. Et on a parlé cet après-midi d'un monde unipolaire ou monopolaire. On se rappelle encore du monde bipolaire. Et il faut se demander à un certain moment, est-ce qu'on vit dans un monde multipolaire? Faut-il souhaiter vivre dans un monde multipolaire? Parce qu'il faut, à mon avis, se rappeler que le monde multipolaire du 19e siècle a été un monde de guerres constantes et répétées qui ont culminé avec la Première, Deuxième Guerre mondiale. On se rappelle encore de la période de la bipolarité qui était suffocante, etc. Personnellement, je pense que la seule alternative crédible à l'hégémonie américaine, c'est de favoriser la suprématie onusienne. Et je voudrais avoir certaines opinions de nos participants distingués sur cette désirabilité de la suprématie onusienne. Moi, je pense que l'Europe est perçue très favorablement dans le monde du tiers-monde. Et le soft power de l'Europe est incomparable, à mon avis. Et vous avez tous les atouts que les Américains ont, technologie et le reste, mais en même temps, vous avez l'avantage de ne pas être perçu comme une menace à nos indépendances chèrement acquises ou bien chèrement recherchées. Mais la question est bipolarité, multipolarité ou suprématie onusienne. J'aimerais avoir quelques opinions.
Merci pour cette question. Peut-être une autre intervention dans la salle. Oui, monsieur.
Yes, Stefano Rizzo from CRS. There is one word which has not been mentioned during these 2 days of debate, which yet is crucial to European foreign policy and to most of the countries which are represented here. And that is immigration. Why do I think it's crucial, and why do I ask you to comment on it? Well, for one thing, during the succeeding waves of immigration from North Africa and from Latin America and from Asia, Europe has not been able to have a common policy. Each country has gone its own way, closing frontiers, establishing blocks, and furthermore, which definitely hurts the credibility of this famous soft power we're talking about, in each country, European country, we are seeing the growth of racist and xenophobic movements. Now, this is quite a serious problem to us. But of course, it's also a serious problem for the countries from which the immigrants come from. Because, as I said, we talk about soft power, we talk about values, but we do not often realize how an immigrant from Latin America or from North Africa who has to cross the Mediterranean Sea values or evaluates the attitudes of the Europeans when he finally arrives on our coast. So I think this is quite a serious problem. As I say, a problem of policy, not so much a problem of values, but of policy. What are we going to have a common policy on this? Thank you.
Bien, je vous propose que nous essayions de répondre rapidement à ces deux questions. D'abord, la première sur le rôle de l'ONU. Monsieur le Président Lagos.
I would like to address both things, because the role of United Nations in global governance is just an outcome, much bigger of what was envisaged in 1945, simply because in this globalized world, we have quite a number of issues that only can be solved at the global sphere. Climate change, drugs, pandemics. What about migration? And then I think that it is precisely because many countries deal with the issue of migration like a domestic policy issue. And this is something that I mentioned yesterday. Number two, very important. Our friend Carlos Fuentes, that somebody remembered yesterday, Carlos Fuentes used to say that in Latin America, all of us are migrants. And some of us, migrants 30,000 years ago, through the Strait of Bering, and nobody asked them for papers, or passport. But I would like to add that in the 19th century, about 2 million Europeans migrate, because you couldn't feed them very well here, and migrate to America. And that's part of history. So human beings always have migrated. And I cannot understand how are we going to be living in a world where everything is globalized, with one exception. The human being cannot cross a frontier. Can you explain me that kind of globalization? Now, if this is the case, now I understand the huge problems. And I would like to end up with a small anecdote, if you excuse me, 1 second. I was making an official visit to China, and everything went fine till the day before the last meeting with a very important member of the party, and he makes some remarks without me vis-a-vis about what has been the vote of Chile vis-a-vis the human rights violations in China, and he was not very happy with that. And I answered and told him, look, sir, you know that because of Pinochet, so we learn because of Pinochet that human rights is very important, etc., etc. The Chilean ambassador was very upset the way that he answered me, etc., etc., and I answered him. And he thought that the following day I had an interview with Jiang Zemin, and Jiang Zemin was not going to receive me. Nothing at all. Jiang Zemin was wonderful as usual. The only problem that he said at the beginning of the interview, I have been told that you are a very important man, a very important person in Chile. And I have kept thinking, since Chile is so far away from China, probably this gentleman has something very important to tell me. So I listened to you. And then I explained the usual thing that we would like to be a bridge between Latin America and China, etc., and not to mention the issue of human rights. And I don't remember how. The question was that he started talking about how beautiful has been the last trip to the United States, and the only problem was that at the IBM, he met an old comrade of him that went to the same university in China, and he says, what a strange, this gentleman migrated to the United States, and now is working for IBM. And outside the IBM, there was some people with a placard say, Jiang Zemin, dictator. Jiang Zemin, dictator. And I say, oh, these people doesn't know what's going on in China, really. I have to deal every week with the Politburo, with the Congress, etc., etc. I'm not a dictator. The following day, he went to Harvard, and then he said, well, here people understand very well. They are so wise people in Harvard, you know. Unfortunately, after his speech, and the outside students and faculty members in Harvard, Jiang Zemin, dictator, Jiang Zemin. What to do? The following day, he was with Bill Clinton. And again, Jiang Zemin, dictator, a dictator. President Clinton, I can understand the problem why they call me a dictator, you know, because we are trying to fight poverty. And in order to fight poverty, I allow people going from the rural areas to Shanghai, and they get the very good salaries in Shanghai. They were there during 6 months, and then they have to return to the rural areas in order to keep another poor people coming to Shanghai and fighting poverty that way. And I think, Mr. President, that since I saw one of my fellow alumni at the university now working in IBM, why don't we send to United States, let's say, 10% of Chinese population? And President Clinton didn't agree with that. And I say, oh, so you are also a dictator. You don't want people to cross boundaries. That was the answer to say, well, you see, it's a different thing. In short, the question of migration, I think, is going to be the real issue, among others. And unless we are able to solve in some kind of general agreement, because, by the way, this is not only a question north to south or south to north. We have the question in Chile with our neighboring countries, and there is also some xenophobic elements. How are we going to be able to deal with that, and how are we going to be able to solve those issues? And I think that this is the kind of a global problem that can only be solved through elements like United Nations institutions, or the G20, or whatever you want to call.
Merci. On pourrait, je crois, vous écouter toute l'après-midi, mais malheureusement, je crois qu'on doit partir à 3 heures. C'est ça, on doit libérer la salle. Hubert Vidin, vous voulez dire un mot?
Un mot, mais très très rapide. Sur la question du monde multipolaire, nous sommes dans un monde multipolaire, c'est une évidence. Les États-Unis ne retrouveront pas l'hégémonie d'avant, la Chine n'aura pas l'hégémonie globale, les émergents continuent à monter, les autres sont toujours là, mais c'est un monde multipolaire instable, c'est-à-dire en mouvement perpétuel, certains qui montent, d'autres qui descendent. L'ONU, c'est un cadre en fait, c'est le nom de la salle. L'ONU n'a aucun pouvoir en tant que tel, sauf si les 5 membres permanents adoptent une résolution contraignante. Donc tout dépend de ce qui se passe au sein des 193 pays qui sont là. C'est la même chose dans le G20 d'ailleurs, où ils sont 25. Tout dépend des alliances qui se font ou pas dans le G20. Ce n'est pas non plus un lieu de gouvernement. Il n'y a pas de gouvernement mondial. Je ne crois pas d'ailleurs qu'il faille le regretter, parce que s'il était mauvais, on ne saurait pas où elle est. Bon, donc je pense que ça va continuer sous une forme instable. En ce qui concerne les migrations, juste un mot. Aucune société ne peut vivre complètement fermée, ça n'existe plus. Aucune société ne peut être complètement ouverte sans règles. Donc on se bat de façon un peu théorique. Ce n'est pas une question de valeur, enfin, c'est important, ce n'est pas qu'une question de valeur, c'est une question de quantité et de rythme et de gestion. Donc c'est une question qui doit être gérée. Mais la seule question, c'est de savoir si c'est géré, chaque pays faisant uniquement ce qu'il décide tout seul, ou si on arrive à le co-gérer. C'est ça le seul problème compliqué. Entre chaque pays d'Amérique latine et ses voisins, entre l'Afrique du Sud et ses voisins, entre le Nigeria et ses voisins, entre l'Europe et la Méditerranée, etc. Est-ce qu'on peut co-gérer ces mouvements? Parce que de toute façon, il faudra les gérer. Et les mêmes qui demandent plus de régulation financière ne peuvent pas demander une dérégulation intégrale des mouvements humains. Dans les deux cas, il faut gérer mieux.
Merci.